All right, so we're back for another deep dive, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Dear Africans series. Have you heard of this series?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. It's produced by IC's Pictures Worldwide, and the head of that company is Latian Kira.
Yeah.
And he's quite the multi-talented guy, right? He's a media expert, author, AI advocate.
Yeah, he wears a lot of hats.
He does wear a lot of hats.
But one of the things that's really impressive is his dedication to using creative media to address the complex issues facing Africa.
Absolutely.
And I think that really shines through in the Dear African series.
It really does. And the particular story that we're going to be looking at today is called A Reckoning in Heaven.
Interesting title.
It is, isn't it? And this one was actually written by Brother GK.
Okay.
So we've got a little bit of a collaboration going on in this series.
Sounds like it, yeah.
So, I don't know, have you had a chance to take a look at this one yet? The Reckoning in Heaven.
I have, yeah. And I think it's a really interesting choice for today's deep dive because it grapples with some pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah.
You know, the legacy of the slave trade in Zanzibar.
Yeah, it's a topic that, you know, continues to resonate even today.
Absolutely.
And it's one that I think deserves a lot more attention and discussion.
I agree.
So, let's just sort of dive right in, shall we?
Let's do it.
So the story opens up in this grand heavenly hall, right? Just imagine this place shimmering with light, you know, the kind of light that feels like pure truth.
Yeah, I can almost picture it.
Right. Like there's no escaping responsibility in this space.
Oh, wow.
And on one side of this grand hall, we've got Sultan Sayyid Said.
Okay.
And his descendants all decked out in, you know, lavish attire.
Oh, wow.
You know, you can tell that they were powerful and wealthy in life, but there's this sense of unease about them. Like they know something's not quite right.
Yeah, like they're about to be held accountable for something.
Oh, yeah.
That's a really interesting contrast. You've got this opulent setting this display of wealth, but underneath it all, there's this current of tension.
Yeah.
And on the other side of the hall, we have the souls of those they enslaved.
Right.
Their presence is described as radiating a mix of pain and dignity.
That's really powerful imagery, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It really sets the stage for this confrontation between the oppressors and the oppressed.
Yeah, and then suddenly this voice booms through the hall.
Oh, wow.
It's neither male nor female, but it's this powerful, all-encompassing voice.
Okay.
And it calls the Sultan to account.
And what does it say?
Well, that's the interesting part. It doesn't seek revenge. Instead, it demands truth and reconciliation.
So it's not about punishment.
No, it's about something deeper.
That's really intriguing. It sets a very different tone for this reckoning, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think so. It's more about understanding and accountability than about retribution.
Right. And that really sets the stage for a more nuanced conversation about historical reckoning, doesn't it?
It does.
Instead of focusing solely on punishment, this story seems to be exploring the possibility of healing and understanding.
Yeah, it's really about facing the truth of what happened and the impact it had.
Absolutely. And it makes you wonder, how much responsibility do we bear for upholding unjust systems, even if they're considered normal in our time?
That's a good question, isn't it? And it's one that I think this story really forces us to confront.
I think so, too.
So the Sultan, at first he tries to justify his actions, you know.
How so?
Well, he argues that he was merely a product of his time, that he built an empire, that the clove plantations thrived because of the labor of enslaved people.
It's almost as if he's trying to convince himself as much as the heavenly court.
Right.
Raises the question, how much responsibility do we bear for upholding unjust systems, even if they're considered normal in our time?
It's a tough question, isn't it?
Boy.
And it's one that I think we all need to grapple with. But the enslaved souls aren't letting the Sultan off easily. They challenge him, you know. They force him to confront the reality of his actions and the depth of their suffering.
Right. They're not going to let him hide behind excuses.
No, they're not. Their voices, long silenced in life, now echo through the hall, demanding to be heard.
So they finally have a chance to speak their truth.
Yeah.
And what do they say? What kind of things do they describe?
Well, they describe the horrors they endured, forced marches, families torn apart, their very humanity denied.
It's heartbreaking to imagine what they went through.
It is. And one woman's testimony is particularly poignant. She speaks of generations of pain, of how the Sultan's wealth was built on the backs of their suffering.
Wow.
It's a stark reminder that history is not just dates and names, but a tapestry woven with human lives and experiences.
Her question to the Sultan really resonated with me. Did his wealth taste bitter? knowing the source of his prosperity?
Yeah, that's a powerful question, isn't it?
It is.
It forces us to consider the true cost of economic progress and who bears the burden.
Exactly. And I think that's a question we all need to be asking ourselves in our own lives.
Yeah, absolutely. So this moment, it seems to really shake the Sultan to his core. And as the enslaved souls continue to share their stories, you can almost feel the shift in the atmosphere of the heavenly hall, you know?
Yeah, like a weight is starting to lift.
There's a palpable sense of both pain and the yearning for truth, wouldn't I say?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what makes this story so compelling.
Yeah.
It's not just about pointing fingers or assigning blame.
Right.
It's about acknowledging the truth and its power to heal.
Exactly. So the Sultan's carefully constructed world built on power and wealth, it starts to crumble as he confronts the human cost of his actions.
That's got to be a difficult thing to face.
It is. And his children, who inherited the benefits of his empire, they're forced to face the brutal reality of how that wealth was acquired.
Right.
It's a pivotal moment, not just for the Sultan, but for his descendants as well.
Oh, I hear that.
They represent the next generation, you know, those who will inherit the legacy of the past, both good and bad.
Absolutely.
And speaking of the next generation, there's a particularly powerful scene where the Sultan's daughter, overcome with emotion, pleads to learn from the enslaved souls. She wants to hear their stories, to understand the truth that was hidden from her in life.
That's a really interesting turn of events. It shows that there's potential for change, even within the family of the oppressor.
Yeah, it's a glimmer of hope amidst the darkness.
It is.
And I think that's what makes this story so powerful.
Yeah.
It doesn't shy away from the horrors of the past.
No, it doesn't.
But it also offers a glimpse of the possibility for redemption and reconciliation.
That's a powerful message, especially given the context of the story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But will it be enough to truly atone for the sins of the past?
You can really feel all these untold stories pressing down on the Sultan and his family.
It's powerful stuff.
It's like this heavenly hall becomes the place where the silenced voices of history can finally speak, you know?
It really makes you think about how often history is only told from one side.
Yeah.
Right?
Like we only get the perspective of the winners.
And this story, I think, challenges us to find those missing voices, you know, to really dig deeper and get the whole picture.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's like a reminder that there's always more to the story than what we've been told.
And the way the enslaved souls tell their stories in this, it's so important, you know.
What do you mean?
Well, they don't demand revenge or anything like that. They want recognition. They want people to know the truth and acknowledge what happened to them.
Yeah.
That desire for acknowledgement is such a key part of any kind of healing or reconciliation.
Right. It's not about punishment. It's about understanding.
Exactly. It's like by sharing their pain, they offer a path towards healing, not just for themselves, but for the Sultan and his family as well.
It's a really profound act of generosity, considering what they went through.
It really is. And the heavenly voice, you know, it echoes this sentiment. It says that true redemption doesn't come from empty words, but from action, you know.
So it's not enough to just feel bad about it.
Right. You have to do something to make amends.
Interesting. So what does that look like for the Sultan and his family? What actions are they called to take?
Well, they're tasked with carrying the weight of these truths, right? And making sure that the stories of the enslaved are never forgotten.
That's a big responsibility.
It is, but it's also a chance to make things right, you know.
I see what you mean.
To try to repair the damage that was done.
Feel like they're given a chance to become guardians of memory.
Exactly. To make sure that history remembers the full story, the suffering alongside the, you know, the so-called achievements.
And I think that responsibility extends to all of us, don't you?
Yeah, I think so too. We all have a duty to learn from the past, to face those uncomfortable truths, and work towards a better future.
Absolutely. The reckoning in heaven is like a powerful reminder that the pursuit of justice and reconciliation is something that we all need to be a part of.
It's an ongoing process, and it takes work.
Right. And it starts with listening to the stories of those who have been silenced, with confronting those uncomfortable truths, and with challenging the narratives that perpetuate injustice.
Well said. So, you know, this brings us back to Latien Kira and the work he's doing with Dear Africans. It's clear that he's really committed to using storytelling as a way to create social change.
Yeah, to spark those important conversations about history, justice, and the future of Africa.
Exactly. He's a visionary in that sense.
Totally agree.
And through stories like The Reckoning in Heaven, we can start to grapple with these really complex issues in a way that feels personal and meaningful.
I think you're right. And it's not just about acknowledging the past, but understanding how it continues to shape our present.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like, are we really seeing the humanity of those who are marginalized today? Are we working to dismantle the systems that create inequality?
Those are tough questions, but important ones.
Absolutely. And while The Reckoning in Heaven might be set in this fantastical realm, its message is definitely relevant to our world today.
Totally agree. It's a call to action.
Yeah.
Urging us to move beyond just acknowledging things and actually do something to create change.
I love that.
And it all starts with listening.
Right, with opening our minds and hearts to the stories of others.
Well said. Now, before we wrap up our deep dive into The Reckoning in Heaven, I want to remind everyone about ᢰKira's work and how you can support him.
Yeah, he has a wealth of knowledge and insights to share, and you can find his WhatsApp catalog link in the show notes. You can also contribute directly to his work by sending a donation to his WhatsApp number, which we'll also include in the show notes.
Every little bit helps him continue this important work of educating and informing.
So if you've been moved by this story and want to support ᢰKira's mission, please consider making a contribution or exploring his WhatsApp catalog.
It's a great way to get involved.
And now let's dive back into the story for our final thoughts. You know, as we get to the end of this story, The Reckoning in Heaven, what really sticks with me is that even after all that suffering, there's still this message of hope.
Yeah, it doesn't shy away from the tough stuff, but it shows that healing and reconciliation are still possible.
It's really interesting how they use the idea of heaven, right? Like, it's the place where true justice can happen.
Yeah.
Not through punishment or anything like that, but by really facing what happened and how it affected everyone.
Yeah, it makes you think about how we deal with justice in our world.
Right. Like, what if we could approach things with that same kind of understanding and focus on truth?
It's a powerful thought. And it definitely makes you question if we're doing enough.
For sure.
Yeah.
These stories, I think, they help us look at ourselves and see if our actions match up with what we believe.
One thing that really stood out to me was how much power those individual voices had.
Oh, yeah. The enslaved souls.
Yeah. They made the Sultan and his family really confront what they had done.
It shows that even when you're up against a lot of power, speaking out can still make a difference.
But we need to make sure we're listening to those voices, especially the ones that are often ignored or silenced.
Absolutely. And that's what ᢰKira is doing with his work, right?
Exactly. He's giving those voices a platform.
Yeah.
And challenging the stories that have always been told.
He's showing us that stories have the power to change things.
To make people think and talk and take action.
He's a real inspiration.
So as we wrap up our look at The Reckoning in Heaven, let's take a moment to think about what this story means for each of us.
It's a reminder that we all have a part to play in making things right.
And that starts with being open to learning and understanding, and challenging ourselves to do better.
Well said. And if you want to explore more of ᢰKira's work and support what he's doing, check out the show notes for his WhatsApp catalog and contact info.
Every little bit helps him keep sharing these important stories.
So let's keep learning and keep pushing for a more just world.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And until next time, keep exploring and keep questioning.